some certain goods and providing sanctions for those who are, in any case, doing so. When we talk about interests over goods, can you remember we define what is the word in legal language used to define every interest which is protected by the law? How we call an interest protected by the law? Right on individual rights. So how do we call, we know that we call human rights, for example, those particular interests dealing with the essential elements of our being and our being part of the societies. So the human rights, the right of self-determination, the right to life, the right to health. So our interests in protecting our life, our interest to protect our health, our interest to do whatever we want according to the fact that we must respect other people's self-determination. And so how do we call in law all the interests protected by the law over goods? So if a good is a value in the sense that it can be put to the market and can be exchanged in order to change the kind of assets of mine. So I have money, I exchange money for having something in return. I have a land, I sell the land in order to have a sum of money, or I rent the land, I limit the availability of this good, which is still mine, but I cannot use it for the duration of the lease contract, and I have in return a sum of money. So these exchanges in the markets are possible just because the law recognizes as a right our interest over goods. And the most important of the rights defining the interest over goods is the right of property. The right of property is that particular interest of keeping with us and exercising the power of control over goods that are, for the moment, we can say that they are pertaining to us. There are mechanisms through which we can get as ours goods. The law is protecting the fact that we are interested to keep these things with us and prevent other people from disturbing the fact that we are enjoying these goods, or prevent other people from stealing, from taking these goods off of our assets. And the whole of the faculties and powers attached to this interest protected by the law is defined as the right of property. And can you remember, we have already talked about the right of property when we analyzed the sentence about the domain name. Can you remember? We said that a domain name is a good to the law because it has all the characters, all the identifiers typical of a good. And as a matter of fact, that sentence that we analyzed, that sentence closed the case, found in favor of the plaintiff, not by using a brand new way of considering the domain names as values to the law, but the court used a very traditional three tiers test, the typical test of assessing whether someone has or not the right of property. So that was an example of the kind of interests that are considered when we are talking about goods. So what a person can do with a good at his disposal is object of what civil lawyers refer to as real rights. Well, where real means over things, comes from the Latin word res, which means a thing. The most important of these rights is certainly the right of property. There are many other rights over the goods, but we are not talking about them. But just remember that the right of property is not the only kind of right over goods, because there are many other kind of interests over goods that fall outside the definition of the right of property or the right of property. But for sure, the right of property, even for historical reasons, is the most remarkable and important of all the rights over things. So if I if I take a flat under a lease agreement, I don't have the money to buy my own flat, or I have the money but I don't want to invest them to buy a flat. I want to invest them for other things. So whatever the reason, I need a place to stay. I do not buy a flat, I rent a flat. I have the right to live into that flat. I have the right to even, make some modifications inside the flat that I rented. The kind of powers and faculties attached to this relation that I have with the good can vary according to the contract, lease contract, and according to the legal system we are. But in general, there are many, many things that we are allowed to do according to the law when we are just lessees. So we are of a flat. When we got a flat, not because we are owners of the flat, but because we pay a sum of money monthly or quarterly in just to have the availability of that place. The kind of right that we have over that thing, so the kind of interests that the law protects over this thing is not a right of property. We're not owners of that. But in any case, we have a series of powers and faculties that the law allows us to enjoy. So the owner cannot get into my flat whenever he wants just because he's the owner. No, he's getting the money from me, and that's enough for him to satisfy his interests of property. I must be let in peace in enjoying the flat that I've taken under a lease agreement, under a rental agreement. So I have powers and faculties over the flat that I rented, but not of the same intensity, let's say, of the owner. Can I sell the flat that I am living into, my not owner, but under a lease agreement? Of course not the owner. We do not have this power. Can we completely change the distribution of the spaces of the premises within? Can we make very intense renovation inside without the as we want, so without the permission of the owner? No. The owner can do whatever he wants with the things that he's owner of without asking permission of anyone. But if we are living in a place under a rental agreement, we must have the agreement. We get the agreement of the owner to do some renovations inside, for example. So there are faculties that are defining our interests protected by the law, but not with the same intensity of the right of property. Right of property is the most important among the individual rights over goods, because it's the one defined in the most intense way by the legal systems. So the kind of things that we are allowed to do with our with the things that it is part of our asset we are owners of, we're entitled to the right of property of, are of a particular intensity. The common characters of property right, of course, the definition of the powers and faculties under a property right can vary a lot according to the legal systems we are. We have no time to deepen the point, but let's say that in the civil law system and in the